Hi, my name is Aileen, and I'm here to record the event that had happened about 2 weeks ago regarding my citizenship. So, just a backstory. I came here in the US in 2006, got married, and then got my permanent resident January 31st of 2007. And then September 30th, 2020, I applied for my naturalization to become a US citizen. And so that is about like a good 15 years of being a lawful US resident before I decided that it's time for me to level it up to become a naturalized US citizen. So that's my story. So I applied September of 2020. We are still living in Pasadena, California at the time that I applied. I really didn't have like a real good reason why I applied. It's just that I heard stories that the application fee for naturalization will gonna increase to like I think $1,000 or so, and so I don't want to be caught up in that situation. And so the last day of September, I decided I'm going to apply so that I don't have to worry about $1,000 because that's a lot of money to begin with um, in the application fee. So I submitted my application online, and even before I applied for the naturalization, I already have the materials for me to study for the civic test. But I never did had the chance really to seriously study because I didn't apply at that time. So when I submitted application that day, September, I started to kind of like open the book and started to like memorize. But I guess with my age, I am my brain is really not that keen anymore into memorizing. So I get frustrated and I'll stop and I'll you know push it to the back burner again and never open the book. Anyways, so um, before I applied for the naturalization, my husband and I were already planning and talking about moving out of California. He always wanted to be close to his family, and so we were looking at the possibility of moving into Florida. So, December of 2020, I started applying. I'm started to look for jobs in Florida, and I chanced up with this opening at a hospital here in Gainesville. And so, the thought of the application for naturalization was pushed back into the back burner again, and I concentrated on getting a job here in Gainesville. So, January of 2021, first week of January of 2021, I had an interview and I got the offer. Um, I got the offer from that job here in Gainesville. So to cut the story short, we decided that we're gonna go ahead and move to Florida. And so when we were already sure that we're moving, we already have the apartment and everything was like fall in fall in the proper in the right places. I submitted the form for a change of address. So February we left California. I think it was February 13th. We left California, took a road trip, and moved here in Florida. We arrived in Florida, I think it was February 17th. And the first thing that I did upon arriving into the apartment complex is to check if there's a mail for us. And so what greeted me is a letter from the USCIS stating that I have an appointment for my biometrics in March of 2021 at the Jacksonville field office. And I was like, whoa, things are going so fast. And we were thinking that, oh, because we're not in the California jurisdiction anymore, which everybody knows that there's a huge population of immigrants in California. That's why I think their office are always like backed up with applications, and maybe that's why my case, you know, got a little bit faster when we moved here in Florida. So March of 2021, I went to the Jacksonville USCIS field office and did my biometrics there. And so I was like, okay, so it's really time for me to study hard and be serious about studying because I already had my biometrics. But still, I still not quite studying and quite seriously, because every time I check on my case online, it will say 12 months, 7 months, the estimated time of decision for my case. And so I was like really not studying seriously. I will just study here and there, memorize some things, but I totally will forget it after a few days. Came 2022 February 16, I checked my case online and I was surprised that they said that they mailed me a letter stating my appointment for my N400 naturalization US citizen interview. And so I couldn't wait for the letter to come into the mail, and so I clicked on the documents and there it is. I was scheduled for an interview March 15, 2022 at 7 o'clock in the morning at the Orlando USCIS field office. So it rattled me a little bit because I am not even 80% studied the civic test, and there's a lot, there's like 100 questions that I need to study and I need to memorize. And so from that day on, I was studying 10 questions a day, memorizing 10 questions a day, and that's it. I was like so stressed. And so I think towards the end of February, I received the letter, and it says there, the documents that I needed to bring. And I got stressed again because it says in the letter that I needed to bring my spouse's birth certificate, which I couldn't find. Maybe because, we moved and I don't know where I put things. So I couldn't find his original birth certificate. And that is where I stopped reading the documents that I needed to bring. And so I immediately requested a certified copy of his birth certificate. So it came into the mail about 3 or 4 days. And then a week before my interview, I was looking at some videos on YouTube, and something popped out of my YouTube website, and it says the N400 US Citizenship mock interview kind of video. I clicked on the link, and there is this lady. I think she's one of an immigration lawyer or something. And then she said that the new version of the naturalization interview doesn't only composed of the civic questions, the reading and the writing portion, but there's also a part where the officer will gonna review your application, and there are some questions or words that the officer will gonna ask you to define the meaning of the word. And I was so surprised. It caught me off guard because I didn't know that I have to study on this word definition, and I only have like a week. Plus, I also found out, I went back to the letter and also found out that I needed to bring another document which I couldn't find, that I know as far as I remember. I threw it out together with some of the papers because I was thinking that I don't need this document anymore. And so I couldn't find it. And so I went on the website again and requested for a certified true copy of that document, but it doesn't guarantee me that it's gonna be mailed to me within a span of a week. So I was so stressed. And so the day before my interview, I was still stressed. I know by heart the civic questions, but the word definition I am not very sure of. Like when I say word definition, it is something like, if you look in your N400 application form, there's a part there that say have you ever. So those questions, they said that the officer will gonna ask you like, have you ever been involved into like a genocide or terrorist group or paramilitary group, something like that. And then the officer will ask you like, do you understand what genocide means? Or can you define what is a paramilitary means? Or can you define what is non-combatant services are? So those are like the examples that I've seen online, and I was so stressed because, in my mind, I know what this word means. But to say it and define it in my own words, or explain it in my own words, it's so hard, especially if it's English, because English is not my first language. Anyway, so my husband was so frustrated on me because I was overthinking. I am so stressed. Like, I don't have this document. And I was like, I might be denied, or they might, reschedule me for some whatever reason. So he said, you know what? Just at this point, all you can do is to give it up all to God. And I was like, I think he's right. I can't do anything anymore. It's beyond my control anymore. So that day I decided, you know what? I am just going to be honest to the officer. Like, if the officer will ask me on about this document and I don't have it, I'm gonna be honest and tell the officer that I misplaced it, because it's been several years now that I didn't thought that I still be needing that document. And I'm gonna be honest. If I cannot define a word, I'm gonna be honest that I know in my heart and in my mind what it means, but it's difficult for me to like express it in my own words. I will just going to be honest and upfront. And I'm totally gave it all up to God. And my only prayer is that I get a good and a nice hearted officer. And so I went to bed early that night. I didn't even know if I slept, because Orlando is about an hour and like 30-50 minutes away from Gainesville, and my appointment time is 7 o'clock in the morning, so we need to leave Gainesville early morning, like 4 o'clock, the latest. And so we woke up early. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat breakfast. I'm still stressed, but I keep repeating to myself, it is not in my control anymore. It's not in my hands anymore. And I said, God, I giving up. I'm giving up to you. If this citizenship is for me, it will happen. If it's not meant to me, or it's not meant for me, maybe it's not my time yet, so be it. And so we went there. I think we were at the area of the field office at around 6 o'clock, and so my husband decided to stop somewhere and get breakfast. And then after having breakfast, we went to the place. And so we were there at about 6:30. The office is still closed because they don't open until 7 in the morning. There are several cars that's already parked, and some other cars are kind of arriving. And so I told my husband, I'm just gonna get out of the car at 6:45 because with the pandemic, they wanted you to be there at least 15 minutes before your scheduled appointment. So I can see that there are other people are already falling in line. And so 6:45, I got out of the car and start walking towards the main entrance where some of the people were already lined up. I think I think the seventh person or the sixth person in line. And so we waited, and then at around, I think, 5 minutes before 7, the security guard came out. He's a very jolly, very happy man. Greeted us with a big good morning and a big smile on his face, and told everyone that today is going to be a good day. And I was like, okay. So he opened the door, and then one by one we went inside, showed him our appointment letter and our green card. And so when it was my turn, he greeted me. He asked me like, how am I doing? How am I feeling that morning? And I said, quite nervous. And he was like, oh, don't be nervous. This is going to be a good day. And I was like, okay, thank you very much. So I showed him my appointment letter and showed him my green card. He checked and he said everything is good. And so I went to the security checkpoint, like, when you put your things in a, just like going into the airport. So I went there, everything looks good, and the other security personnel pointed me to go to the customer service area where another officer is there, checked my application letter, or sorry, my interview appointment letter and my green card, checked it on the system, and then he asked me to take off my glasses, look in the camera. So they're gonna take your picture, and you have to do your fingerprint. And then after that, he gave me a number and instructed me to wait and sit at the waiting area. So the number that was given to me was P7. So I assuming that I'm the seventh person in line. And so I went to this huge waiting area with, chairs just like the airport. And I sat down, looking around, trying to figure out, where is the interview gonna happen. And I think I was like sitting there waiting not even 5 minutes. The door opened, the door behind me opened, and I heard a gentleman announce or called the number P7. And I was surprised, and I was like, oh, it's me. That's my number. And I wasn't really expecting it because, no, who would have thought that they were going to call P7? Aren't they supposed to say P1? And do the chronological order of the number anyway. So he called P7. And so I looked at my number and I was like, oh, it's me. And so I gathered my stuff, stood up, and head towards the door. And it was a middle-aged gentleman. I think he's about like in his mid to late 50s. Tall guy. Um, he's not an American. I think he is um, like a Puerto Rican or something. I don't know, but he's not an American. He doesn't have a blonde hair, but he's very nice. He greeted me good morning, asked me how my day was, and he told me to follow him. And then in the middle of walking towards his office, he was like, "Oh, Aileen, do you have your mask?" Because I took off my mask because the security guard says that it's not mandatory for us to wear a mask inside the building. It's our choice if we wanted to. He said he's not wearing his, so I took off my mask. But the officer asked if I have a mask, and I said, "Oh yes, officer, I have it in my purse." And he said, and I asked him, "Do you want me to put it on?" And he said, "If you don't mind, because we're still in the pandemic." And I was like, "Oh, no problem, officer. I'll put it, I'll put it on." I just took it off because the guard told us it's not really mandatory, but there's no problem. I could put it on, so I put on my mask. Um, he led me to his office. There was a chair, and there's like the glass panel separating me and him. And then he told me to take a sit, and he said, "I just wanted to see your appointment letter, your green card, and your passports." And so I handed it over to him on a little slot, just like when you go to a bank. And then I asked him, like, "Oh, officer, do you need my number?" And he said, "Oh, yeah, just, put it together with the stuff that he asked me." And so he turned on his computer and he said, "Just bear with me. My computer is a little bit slow this morning. And, but don't worry, I have your file in front of me." And he said that I was reading your file, and he was like, "You've been a resident for 15 years. How come you only applied now for your citizenship?" Because he said mostly it was like, after 3 years or 4 years, then people apply. And so I did chuckle a little bit, and I said, "Yeah, it took me a while." I said, "I got busy with, work, um, raising a family, and paying my bills." And I said at that point, um, I didn't really think about, applying for my citizenship because I got busy, especially with work. And he said, "Oh, yeah, I understand." And it was like, and he said, "Oh, you live in Gainesville. Your jurisdiction is Jacksonville." So he said, "I don't know what's going on in the Jacksonville office, but we've been getting a lot of applicants from Jacksonville." And he said that I heard that some of the applicants been need to stay in a hotel here because it's a long drive for them. And he was like, "How long did it took you from Gainesville to here?" And I said, "About an hour and 30 minutes. The traffic wasn't bad because the weather was good." And he said, "Oh, that's good. And then, but you have to wake up early, huh?" And I said, "Yeah, my husband took me here, he drove me here. He's my biggest support system. And he offered to drive me." And so he left Gainesville at around 4 o'clock in the morning. I was like, "Whoa, that's so early." And I said, "Yeah, it's a little bit early for us." But, we wanted to anticipate whatever things that might happen, and I don't want to be, late for my appointment. And he just nodded. And then he said, "Okay," said, "my computer is now working." And then he said, we're going to start with the civic test, and then the English test, and then the reading test, and then the writing test, and then we'll go over your application," he said. But he said, "At first, I wanted to put you on an oath." And I said, "Okay." And so that's one thing that I know that's going to happen, because when I was watching these videos, they mentioned that you're going to be put on oath. You have to stand up, raise your right hand, and put you on an oath, and then after that, the officer will ask you like what you just did. And so I was about to stand up, and then the officer said, no, you can just remain sitting down. We can do this seated. I just want you to raise your right hand. So I raised my right hand, and he put me on an oath. And then he said, okay, let's begin. He said, let's do the civic test. I'm going to ask you 10 questions, and you only need to answer 6 to be able to pass the test. So here are the questions. This is not in order as he asked me, because when I left his office, while I was like sitting in the waiting room waiting for the oath taking ceremony, I tried to recall what I was asked, but I couldn't remember. And so when my husband and I arrived home that afternoon, I was like looking at my reviewer on my phone, the app, and I was like browsing the question, and that's when I recall the question that I was asked. So this is not in the in the order that he asked me. So one of the questions he asked me was, how old do citizens have to be to vote for president? So the answer is 18 years old and older. And then he also asked me, when was the Constitution written? I think this is the last question that he asked me. And so the answer is 1787. He also asked me, in what month do we vote for president? So the answer is November. And then another question, if the president can no longer serve, who becomes president? I answered the vice president. Then he asked, what are the 2 major political parties in the United States? So I answered Republican and Democratic. And then he asked me, what is one promise you make when you become a US citizen? So I answered him, to defend the Constitution and laws of the United States. So those are 6 questions, and he said, oh, very good. He said, you answered 6 questions, you passed your civic test. And I was like, okay, thank you. Then he said, now we're gonna go to the reading part of the test. He said, there's a tablet in front of you, and I'm going to send you a sentence. Can you read it to me? And then the iPad showed, who was Abraham Lincoln? So I read that to him loud, and he said, very good. He said, okay, now we're going to do the writing portion. I'm going to dictate to you a sentence. I want you can use the stylus or your finger. I want you to write it down on the iPad in front of you and send it to me. And I said, okay, officer. And then he said, are you ready? And I said, yes, officer, I'm ready. So he said, I want you to write this down. Lincoln was the president during the Civil War. And he repeated that twice. Said, Lincoln was the president during the Civil War. And so I wrote it on the iPad and then sent it to him. And then he read it and he said, perfect. He said, you passed your civic test, you passed your reading and your writing test. And he said, so now let's go over your application form. So this is the part where I am very nervous about, because this is the part where I've seen in the videos that the officer were going to ask me to define some words. And so I was a little bit nervous, and I'm nervous also about the documents that I didn't have. And so he asked me like, what is your current legal name? So I told him my name. I said, Aileen Evaristo Grant. And he said, oh, Evaristo is your middle name? And I said, I took it as my middle name, but it's actually my maiden name. And so he said, oh, okay. And he said, do you want to retain this name, or you want to legally change your name today? And I said, no, officer, um, I don't want to change my name. I said I made my maiden name as my middle name in memory of my father. And he said, oh, okay, I got it. And he said, that's good. And then he asked me for my birthday. And then he asked me if I am married, and I said, yes, officer, I am married. I am. Oh, this is what I told him. Yes, officer, I am happily married, going 16 years now and counting. And he started laughing and said, oh, that's nice to hear. And then he asked me about my spouse name and his date of birth. And then he asked me if we have children, and I said yes, we do have a child. And then he asked if it was a son or a daughter, and I said we have a daughter. And then he asked her name and her birthday. And then after that, he asked me about my address, and he said, oh, so you live in Gainesville? And he said, oh, you used to live in California before? I said, yes, officer, that's one thing that I wanted to get corrected in my application, although I know I submitted the change of address. And he said, yes. And he said, can you give me your previous address, just, to verify? And so I told him my previous address in California, and he said, that was a big move. He said, California to Florida. And then I told him, yes, officer, it was a big move, but my husband wanted to be close to his family because we've been in California for 14 years, and I guess he misses his family, and so it's about time for me to give him that opportunity to be close to his family. And he was like, that's very nice of you, he said. And then he asked me like, oh, are you currently working? I said, yes, officer, I'm currently working, but not in California anymore, as what's written in my application. And he said, that's what I was about to ask. And he said, where do you work now, so that we can update your application? And so I told him the company I work. And so he was typing it, and then he asked me like, do you know the address? And then he said that if you don't know, that's fine, because I can Google it. But I said, no, officer, I can tell you the address of my workplace. And so I gave him the address. He even asked me to spell, the street. And then he was like, okay, I'm just gonna ask you some more questions. Like, have you? This is the have you ever now, which I am, kind of nervous about. So he asked me if I have ever owed the government or with the federal taxes, something like that. And I said, no, officer. And then he asked me about being part of a terrorist group or something like that. And I said, no, officer. And then he asked me about, am I willing to do non-combatant services? And I said, yes, I am willing to do. And then I don't know what else he asked me, but the last thing that he asked me is like, are you willing to take the full-fledged of allegiance if you become a United citizen today? And I said, yes, officer. And then he asked me, you understand what is the oath of allegiance is? And I said, yes, officer, I do. And he said, um, um, he said, what do you think is the oath of the allegiance about? And I said, it's the promise that I make to be loyal to the United States of America, its laws and its constitution. And he was like, very good. And he said, congratulations, you passed. And then, see, we're done, he said. And I was like so relieved, because he didn't ask me for any documents. He didn't ask me for the word definition. And so he said, I'm gonna send you the information that we made, that we updated in your application form. I want you to review it. If the spelling is correct, if there's anything that is not right, let me know and we will correct it. But if everything looks good, I want you to sign it and date it. And so while I was doing that, he asked me like, "Do you want to take your um, oath today to save you time to traveling back here in Orlando?" And I said, "That would be awesome, officer. If it is a possibility that I can have my oath taking today, I would really appreciate it." And he said, "Yes, I'm gonna make it happen to you." They usually wait for like 15 to 20 people to pass, and then they'll put you in a room to do your oath taking. And then I was so relieved, and the officer was very nice. He handed me this paper stating that I passed my civic test, my English test, and my reading and writing test, and that he recommend for my citizenship be approved. And then he walked me to the door, and then he instructed me to wait in the waiting area. It will take a little bit longer. He told me where the restroom, if I needed to go to the restroom, and he just told me just not to leave the building because he will be called anytime. And then he said again, "Congratulations." And I said, "Thank you very much, officer. Have a blessed day." And I went out. I went to the waiting room and waited. It's not even 10 minutes that I was inside the officer's room. The interview didn't lasted not even 10 minutes. It was very quick. It was very casual and very stress free. That's why I was telling myself that I stressed myself for nothing. Anyway, it's good though, because when you're stressed, you becomes more um into your element. You know what I mean? So that's it. That's my story since March 15, 2022, which is, 2 weeks, um 2 weeks ago. I became a US citizen. And so my tips, of course, don't forget to study hard on your civic test. Um, you have 10 opportunities, 10 questions that they're going to ask you. You only have to answer 6 correct to be able to pass. And preparation wise, all I can say is like, it's nice to bring the documents that you think will be needed, like birth certificate of your spouse, birth certificate of your children, income tax return, proof that you're still married if you are applying for a citizenship through a spousal marriage. Bring all the documents if you have it. If you don't have it, don't stress yourself. Just be truthful why you didn't have it. Um, I guess being honest in the front in a very humble way really makes a difference instead of making up why you didn't have it. And then what else tip that I can give you is just be yourself. Be confident in a way that is not too arrogant. Be confident and humble at the same time. Like, be respectful, dress appropriately. Although I've seen in the Orlando office that there are some applicants that are just wearing jeans and shirt and sneakers. I know it's not very professional, but I guess it is just how Florida is. They're very laid back. But still, act professionally, make eye contact, be gracious. Like everybody else is saying, treat this as a job interview. Treat this as you are applying for a job that you really, really like, and you have to put your best foot forward without being so arrogant. Um, and that's it. Just give everything up to God. Pray. If this is for you, this is gonna be for you. If this is gonna happen, this is going to happen. You're going to pass. Just be truthful. Take a deep breath. I know sometimes when we're nervous, we kind of like stammer, or, you know, our voice shake. It happened to me, my voice shaking. I get teary eyed. Sometimes I cry a little bit if the topic is very sensitive. But just be honest. Just show them your good intention, that you wanted to become a citizen of this country because for a good reason, for a good intention, that you don't mean harm. You're doing this for your family, and not because of any other, crooked reason. Be honest, be confident without being arrogant, be yourself, be respectful, and just enjoy the process. Enjoy the conversation that you have with the officer. Treat it like you were just conversing with a stranger. And it's going to be a good day. It's gonna be a good experience. I didn't regret that I overthink. I didn't regret that I stressed myself out. I am just happy that this is done and over with. It took me 15 years to become a citizen because it wasn't my priority before. But I also think that this is the right time. This is the right time for me. And so, to all of you guys who are waiting and in the process of waiting for your interview appointment, just be prepared. Prepare yourself. If you know your capabilities, you know that you studied hard for the civic test, you know that you have all the information, all the documents, you don't have to worry anything about. But always, always, always find time to review and go over the application that you submitted. If there is something that you find that is incorrect, because we're just human beings. Sometimes we miscalculate, or sometimes we misread what is being asked. But if you see that there is like a mistake or an error, just be honest to the officer that you made an honest mistake in filling out the form. For example, I've seen a lot of videos saying that there's a question about the number of trips you made for the last 5 years outside the United States. So some people only like put one, but they didn't remember, or they forgot that, oh, we went to a cruise in this so and so date, so it should be like 2 trips outside. We went to a cruise in Mexico, and then that's outside the United States. But at some point when you're filling up your application, you didn't count that. And so find time to review it. Because I also seen some people like how many times your spouse has been married, and they only put one because they're thinking about the husband's previous marriage, not this current marriage. But the current marriage is included. And so if you put one and you didn't realize it, just be honest to the officer that you made a mistake, and if he can correct that for you. So make time to review your application form, because I know there's like, for me, there's like a year gap from the time that I submitted my application to the time of my interview. So sometimes we can't remember what we put in our application form. So aside from your civic test, pay attention and make time to review the application that you submitted. And if you find something like, try to understand each question now that you are reviewing it. And if you think that you made a mistake, just make a mental note of that mistake and just be open and honest to the officer that you made a mistake. That way they know that you are not hiding anything. So, number one tip is to be truthful and honest. Number two, be confident without being overly confident and without being arrogant. Be humble. Review. Prepare yourself. And most importantly, give it to God. So, I wish everyone who's on the application process and waiting for your appointments, I wish you all the best. You can do it. If I was able to do it, other people passed and was able to do it, you too can do it. Just put that in your mind and put it in your heart and pray. Bye. Thank you for watching.